Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Money in the Law, My FM 101.3. Here at the home of the center of all things community at the My FM 101 studio, 101.3 studio.
Yes.
With your host, Jay Marsden. He is from the Marsden Law Group. And I'm John Drohan from Main Effort Financial. And welcome to Money in the Law. And of course, we have by the third leg of the triumvirate, Tom Harmon for Holliston Hub, HCAT. Tom is... he's the one who makes us look good.
Yes, he does.
So for those of you, right now I think our latest count based on the polling is that we are at 17 million listeners on the My FM. That's live.
That's live.
Well, that of course includes streaming.
Yes, that's right.
And then the rest is viewing. So the viewing piece we have a little bit. So we're probably a little bit less than that. But
those are people viewing, at their own convenience.
Exactly.
That's how you think about it.
If you want to see us, and I'm right now, you're like intrigued. If you haven't already, you're intrigued.
You're intrigued.
Like, you know what? And you always are. Whenever you hear somebody on the radio, you're like, I wonder what in your mind you picture what they look like,
and they never look the same.
Right? And I'm telling you right now, we're not gonna meet your expectations.
You will be sadly.
It's not gonna happen.
Sadly disappointed. That's right. That's
but
exactly
you
right.
can go to Holliston Hub,
yes,
right?
You
go to Holliston Hub and the Holliston Hub YouTube channel. You can see old shows, and we have about 8,000 of them.
Yep.
Go to the Holliston Hub.
And the old shows are helpful because there's a lot of pressure in the office for me to upgrade my headshot, because for some reason they seem to think that I've changed over the last 15 years.
From your
at the office, at my
the
office,
law
yeah,
office.
not at your office, at my office, yeah. And I'm under an intense amount of pressure.
That's a slippery slope.
Update the headshot.
That's a slip. Well, but you know what? On the one hand, you're like, well, yeah, the 10 years ago might look a little bit different, right?
Maybe,
right?
Maybe, yeah.
But,
a little more jowlery.
At the same time, it's not you.
No, not at all.
No, you're not that
not
guy,
at all.
and neither am I.
No.
Tom, on the other hand,
hasn't changed.
He's timeless.
Hasn't changed.
Yeah, he's
timeless. That's right.
All right, so
Benjamin Buttons.
Yeah, he's Benjamin's Button.
He's 106. Nobody knows it. He's going backwards. Yep, that's right.
How are you?
I'm swell. Great, super. Wednesday, we're closing out the month of October, which I can't believe.
Went by quickly.
We just started it.
Yeah.
But yeah, all good. It's all good. No complaints.
I'm good too. Thanks for asking. Everything is, everybody's got a place to be. So people always ask where everybody's got a place to be.
Everyone's where they're supposed to be, I tell people. Yep.
Everybody's got something to do. Right. And before we know it, we're going to start talking about which I know you don't like talking about. But
even say it.
We're gonna talk. So this is. If you're listening to this is going to be broadcasting on Saturday, the 1st of November, correct?
Yep.
Or sorry, the 2nd of November, because the 1st is Friday, and that means Thursday is Halloween. So this is kind of the Halloween.
This is the Halloween show.
It's pretty spooky.
And you say to yourself, what do you got dressed up as? The answer is nothing. Nothing. No.
I am dressed up as not even a financial planner. I'm dressed up as a guy who just decided to go to the radio.
Dressed up as a suburban dad. Who's going to stop by Stop and Shop, do some shopping.
I have to pick up two things at the store.
Eggs.
Swing by Lowe's, not a sponsor.
That's right.
And then I got to pick some kids up.
That's right.
Pick some kids up from practice.
Oh yeah. Yep.
It's.
You've been on your own for a long time. Prior to being on your own, do you remember when you had to actually put a suit on to go to work?
Yeah.
It was a million years ago, right?
It feels like it, right?
That I understand. And I had an event yesterday at the office, and I wore a suit for the first time, and not a long time, but I'm a little.
It wasn't mine.
That's right. It was rented. That's right. But I rolled in and I was doing my thing, and then I met some people out after work last night, and somebody said to me, I walked in and they said to me, do you dress like this every day at work? And I was like, well, I kind of dress to impress every once in a while, right? I know how to,
So the answer is, the short answer to that is no.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, so no.
Yes, the answer is sure.
I do not dress like this.
But I remember, when I was at Fidelity, I remember people were
suit up.
Everyone was suited up. It was
suit
not.
Up
it was
every day.
Yep, every day.
Even if you're not going to see anybody. Even if you're not going to see a client.
We were on the phones.
Yeah,
I was a phone rep.
Sitting on the phone.
Yes.
You had your sleeves rolled up. You look like what's his name? The guy, the MS guy, the NBC guy who's like, Bill, I forget, the
Whoever,
stock guy. Yeah,
whoever,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
Jim
you have-
Cramer.
Yeah,
Jim Cramer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have your jacket draped over your chair, right?
Yep.
Because you don't have to wear your jacket all
not on
day.
the phone. No, not
Now
on the
you're on the
phone.
phone. Your ties, your top button's not unbuttoned.
Yep,
Or not
yep,
buttoned, and
yep.
you got your sleeves rolled up.
But you had to
and
look
you're-
presentable. It looked presentable.
Well, you had to be able to get presentable
Yes.
in case there was a meeting.
quickly. Yes, quickly. Yep. And,
Or in case somebody needed to borrow your tie. Give me that tie, right?
Oh yeah, like being
The
back
manager
in,
walks over.
being back in high school, right? But I mean, if you had to, you couldn't show up at the office and not have a tie on. And then you had a closet full of suits, and you had guys who would you would get your shirts dry cleaned.
Remember?
Because you had to get them dry cleaned
Yeah.
because you couldn't
Starch,
iron
little
them
extra
at the house,
starch in
right?
those, yeah.
So you get them dry cleaned, and then you had, you had guys had French cuff shirts, guys were wearing bow ties. I mean, it was a thing getting
So
dressed to go to work.
uncomfortable.
And then they introduced the casual Friday.
Yep.
And it
Game
was like,
changer.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was like being in Catholic school, and they let you wear. We used to call it tag day. You could buy
Yeah.
a 1 day, wear your regular clothes
Yeah.
1 day, right? And then that was the beginning of the end. That
And
was the
the-
beginning of the end.
Right, and for all the right reasons, right? I mean, you're like Harvey in Suits, right? There's no need for you to dress that uncomfortably all day long.
Well, if you do it right, you're not uncomfortable. I mean, you got to find a good tailor. And it was funny.
you're Harvey, you're doing it right.
All the Fidelity guys went to the same guy to buy their suits. Right? We all went to this one place downtown, and the guy was the master of just saying, "Look," he was like, "You guys just need work suits. These are work suits. You're not going to spend $5,000 on
Don't
every
do it.
suit. You're going to spend a couple of bucks on these suits right here, and then you're going to have one really nice one for the wedding or for some big
For
event.
game day.
So you had to spend a little more money on that, but the guys were super matter of fact. They had it all figured out, and it was in this place where you never would have found it. You were just walking through the downtown crossing area, and you kind of had to go up a set of stairs and through a secret door, and then you had to find your way in. And then
and
they
you
would
just followed the smell of polyester, and there you were, right?
well, worst of all. Come on, worst of all. Yeah, worst of all. And they knew everything. They knew everything. I mean, they answer all your questions. They knew how to dress. They were.
You didn't have that wrinkle-free stuff? Yeah.
Not then. You didn't. No. That was an iron and a can of spray starch. Remember that? Remember that?
God.
Gonna get iron a shirt for work tomorrow.
Yeah, it's
The minute
funny.
you put it on, you walked in the other room, it's wrinkled.
Yeah, it's funny. So back in the day when we in other professions, we too had to wear,
Sure.
had to wear, and there was the do-it-yourself guys, right?
Yep.
And guys did it because you saved a lot of money, and there was a lot
Sure.
of guys who just didn't have the cash, right? Especially like the younger soldiers, and then and it was funny because the lieutenants, who made a little bit more money than the soldiers. The lieutenants would try some do-it-yourself stuff, and it would be a matter of like hours before some senior non-commissioned officer, like the oldest guy in the building, which means he was like 40,
Yep.
right? Which just seemed like he could have been 80. He jacks you up, and he's like, "Sir, what in God's green earth are you doing? Like, are you kidding me? Really? You can't afford, with all the money you're making, you can't afford to take your car to the dry cleaners, get you a uniform press?" Just say like that.
Well, part of the hassle was like humping it all around.
Yeah.
Right? Like, okay, you bring the bag in, you throw the shirts on it, then you come back, they give you 70 hangers, you got to lug them back to your car, you got to find a place to put them. Then some people were like, "Oh, I'm just going to get it all done." I mean, all these different scams everybody was running.
I mean, think about the dry cleaner. I mean, kind of post, all that.
Yeah.
The dry cleaners, those guys how do they stay in business? Right?
I don't know. Because I haven't been to a dry cleaner and I couldn't tell you
Yeah,
how long.
right.
What do you get in dry clean these days? I mean, now I'm not saying in the casual way. I'm just saying all the clothes are made so differently.
Yeah.
If somebody ever said to me, "Jay, here's a $4,000 suit and you got to get it dry cleaned once a week," I'd be like, "Keep it, keep it."
I don't need that.
Yeah.
There's no reason for me to have that.
Yep.
Yeah.
This cashmere sweater feels wonderful on
great.
me, but I'm never
Dry
going to
clean
wear it.
only.
I'm going to wear it 2 times, and that's the end of it.
Yeah.
And then it's going to sit somewhere because it's dry clean only. Never.
I mean, you could probably use the theory of, am I ever going to take this thing to Key West? And if the answer is no,
Then
you
don't even-
probably don't need it.
No.
Right? You
No,
don't.
we're in purge mode. Purge mode for all that stuff. Yep.
All right. So
What's on your mind?
What's on my mind
Yeah,
today? I have
yeah.
something on my mind.
All right.
All right.
You
Because
want to tell us, and we'll take a quick break.
I'm going to tell you. I'll just tell you. All
right, just tell me.
I'm not going to tell
All right,
everybody else.
all right.
So what I want to talk about today, and you're going to like this,
Always.
is I want to talk about process.
Got it.
I want to talk about how and process, not just in the financial planning world or in the legal world, but just in anything that you do, is if you can have a process, if you can have a system that you put in place, and how it can alleviate so many things that where you don't miss things, and at the same time you save a ton of time, and you're 1,000% more efficient.
Love it.
That's what I want to talk about.
I love it. Let's talk about that.
Tom's not his head.
He's chomping at the bit. He's like, yeah.
Tom's usually not listening, but right
now he's like,
Not
well,
as- all right.
I got to process you two knuckleheads.
We're going to talk. Tom's going to talk about the process of getting this thing right. We're going to talk about process when we come right back here on Money in the Law, My FM 101.3. Don't go away.
And we're back, My FM 101.3. Jay Marsden with the Marsden Law Group. John Drohan, Main Effort Financial. Tom's on the bag today. We are here in the center of it all, right here, the My FM Media Center, My FM 101.3, WMRC 1490 AM. And you are listening to...
Is it still 1490? Is it still cooking on 1490?
I'm assuming it is. The sign says it is. I'm assuming it is.
It's got to be.
It's got to be. It's got to be. Why would you give up that bandwidth? Nobody's going to do that. We're going to have to do that.
Why would you give that
No
up?
way. No way. No
Exactly.
way. So
why would you throw away that old wool suit? That
we just talked about the one you have to get dry clean only. That's right. That's right.
Why would you throw that away?
That's right. Speaking of dry cleaning only, we're talking about process today. We're talking. It's funny that you mentioned process. For those of you who wonder how much time John and I talked during the week about the show, we kind of we both work independently during the week to say, what do you want to talk about? What's on your mind? And many, many times, without fail, we roll in and it's like
kind of weird.
It's the same idea.
It's kind of weird.
I was thinking the same exact thing.
We walk to the beat of the same drum oftentimes.
Which is very interesting. So the process thing was interesting because we spend a lot of time working on that at the law firm. And we just went through a period where we weren't really following our process as much as we should be. And it created some problems. Nothing major, not a big deal. But just things where we go back and we say, okay, how did this thing get off the rails? And inevitably it comes down to, well, you weren't either following your process or you hadn't developed a process to follow. That's what you need to kind of worry about. And it takes some of the guesswork out of it.
I mean, back in the world, right? And I'm with you. That it's one of those things where it's when you get it and you do it correctly.
Yep.
You're like, well, how did we do this? How did we even function before, right? But then, especially when you're in smaller shops like our shops, or or a family, or some kind of small element where you kind of let everybody's allowed to kind of have their own independent thinking and things, which is great, and which encourages and that's kind of the the balance that you have is like, well, there's the procedure, but at the same time you have to be able to think, the old term of thinking outside the box, right?
Yeah.
There's the box. You operate in the box, but you have to be able to think outside because there's going to be things that your process doesn't cover, right? There's going to be things that your process doesn't articulate that this is how we deal with this thing because it's new, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
So the idea of developing a system or developing a process that enables you to react to things that you don't necessarily see coming, that to me is the key to be able to kind of get this organized, and then be able to put it into implementation.
Well, the other thing it does is it takes you away from having to think about everything. Single thing every single time, right?
Yep.
When you automate that process, if you can, to the degree that you can automate that process, then it builds some real consistency, and then you can start focusing on either the things that you hadn't either seen or you weren't prepared for, you didn't think were going to happen, but it lets a lot of the stuff that can kind of become routine in a good way.
And a lot of times, especially if you're in a fast-moving organization, right, where things, or it's a bigger organization, then it's mission critical. You have to have it. You have to have some semblance of a process, because if not, if you have, it's one thing if you have one person who's trying to make things up as they go along.
Sure.
It's another thing if you have 30 people or 50 people, then you just become you become inept, and you can't, nothing gets done because there's too much time spent on kind of reinventing the wheel.
Well, and then depending on how much turnover you have in your organization, you're going to have to reinvent the wheel every single time, right? So if you not only do you have to have a process, but you got to write it down, right? You got to have a place where that has to live, because when you bring in a new person, when you bring in some new people, you want to do something a little bit differently, you have a place to refer that to say, this is how we do things, right? And then that person can kind of learn those things, and then from a client experience, it's better because the clients have the same experience. People complain about sometimes about the redundancy in things, but there's also a certain degree of predictability, right? Now, you may like,
Which you have to have.
that's right, you may not like McDonald's. You may not like Wendy's, right?
Well, that's what they're built on, right? Think about it, right?
But you know, every time you go, you know exactly what you're going to get. You know exactly what to expect, right? The front of the house is a little bit different because they're doing things depending on staffing and stuff like that. You know, they've got, screens that you use to kind of order your food now as opposed to everybody getting up in line. But behind the scenes, when they make that stuff, they all make a French fry the same way. They all make a hamburger the same way. They all make a filet of fish the same way. We all know what those things look like, feel like, smell like, and taste like because they have just built in that redundancy so that people know exactly what they're getting.
And that's part of that model, right?
Yep.
That's part of that where when I go to McDonald's, no matter where it is, that Big Mac is going to taste the same as it does in Topeka, Kansas, as it does in Los Angeles, California.
Yep, absolutely right.
And I know how long it's going to take. I know about how much it's going to cost, and that's that fast food model which is applied to a lot of different industries. But that's because you know what you're getting, and that predictability. There's comfort in that. There's peace of mind in the sense that I'm not expecting prime rib. I'm
Right.
expecting what I'm expecting, which is what that Big Mac tastes like, which has been tasting like for the last 30 years, and then right, and then. How do those? But again, the whole idea of having a process and we just mentioned this earlier is how you have to be able to react to things because things are going to change, right?
Sure.
Things are different than when McDonald's first came out, 56 years ago, right?
Whatever it is, yeah.
Right before we were born. That's when it came out. Yeah. When McDonald's first showed, a lot's changed, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you and I are here, which is awesome.
Well,
John's here.
think about what wasn't there. Think about what wasn't there. You didn't have a drive-through. You had a drive-up.
Yeah.
Right? You'd pull up, they'd come out, they'd do something like that. Some places made that their thing, so their process was different, right?
Because that's what their particular market might have
Right.
called for. That area, and then the same thing with what I was getting at is that so McDonald's has evolved. They've always had the Big Mac and the cheeseburger, right? They've
Sure.
had that, but then think of all the countless things that have kind of come into the McDonald's menu, right? I mean,
Sure.
use it to staying with this example. So and how remember when the health craze and like the let's stay away from just like the regular fast food burger and like now then right the fillet of fish you mentioned,
Yeah.
right? So the fish sandwich came in and then this is the healthiest thing you're ever going to eat, right?
Oh, yeah, forget that dollop of powder sauce. Yeah.
But other things, right? Like McDonald's they've had salads, they've had a countless different types of they've had the pita bread and all this stuff.
Well, think
over
about when
the years.
they came up with the chicken tender, right? The chicken nugget, right?
Nugget.
Think about when they come up with the Happy Meal for kids, right? All driven around getting the kids want that pulls them into the restaurant, and then they had a plan for how do we package this. Then they had a plan for what is the actual prize going to be, right? And then they had to deal with remember your kids were in the car and they'd say, they want a specific prize, and it's not that prize this week, or it is that prize this week,
Right.
and you're at the window, beg, borrow, steal to can I get the
Driving away.
Can I get the blue instead of the red, the red instead of the white, whatever it was, just trying to figure that all out. That's all that has to be built into their process.
So back in the old days, in 1,000 years ago, in a different industry that I was in, what we used to call the process, and this is one of the things that I loved about the Army, was the standard operating procedure,
Sure.
or the SOP.
Absolutely.
And pretty much all, I would say 97% of what I did in the Army revolved around the SOP.
Yep.
Whether it was reading the SOP, learning the SOP, training the SOP, studying the SOP, maybe tweaking the SOP a little bit.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, that's what we did. That's what you did in the Army. What are we doing today? We're practicing this particular event or this particular tactic or this particular thing as it's written in the SOP. And the Army has, you hear about all the, you talk about the Army field manuals or FMs, right?
Yep.
And, you often hear the reference in the movies and stuff, FM 101.1, right? All these, FM 101.3. Wait a minute, is that
Hold
one,
on.
right?
That sounds real.
Yeah, that's the field manual on how to stay local.
That's right.
But yeah, there was a book about everything. There was a book about how to do everything, how to pack your rucksack, how to clean your weapon, how to how to build a fighting position. There was a standard operating procedure that because think about it, you cast your mind back to World War II
Sure.
when they're drafting everybody and guys come into the Army this is the Army, Mr. Jones, and you're like, hey, we're going to teach you how to be in the Army, and we don't have that much time because Hitler's over there, and
we got to get this project rolling.
Exactly. So you got to learn. We got to bring you up to speed quick. So that's what they did. They had a process, and they learned the standard operating procedure and how to do your basic whatever it was that you were assigned to, whatever your job was.
Sure.
You learned how to do that, and then you learned the basic soldiering skills, right? How to shoot a weapon, how to dig a foxhole, how to go to the bathroom, when there wasn't a nice toilet around, when there wasn't a men's and ladies room around. You learned all that stuff because the Army. That was the beauty of the Army. They took out a lot of the thinking. They said, hey, if you have a question, go to the SOP. And it was great because you had guys, the keepers of the SOP were the non-commissioned officers, were the sergeants, were the drill sergeants, were the platoon sergeants, the first sergeants. And these guys would walk around and all they did was just SOP enforcement. And if some soldier was doing something wrong, they'd be like, God, there would be some very colorful explicatives that may go along with it. But then but nothing, not detriment. No, they were doing it for the soldier's good to potentially save that guy's life. And they said, why aren't you doing it like the SOP says? Fix it and then redo it. And that was one of the, but when I left that organization and came to the private sector, that's what made sense to me.
Yes.
Why don't I have a standard? And we do it. We have it in our office. We have a standard operating procedure of how we do everything inside the office. And you know what? It makes it simple. It makes me sleep better at night.
Yep.
And everybody understand, and it puts everybody on the same sheet of music.
Well, it also alleviates the 24/7, 365. John. How do we do this? Because you can teach everybody, and then once you've taught the teacher can teach somebody else, and then again, there's more consistency. The client experience is better. It's improved. It's the same. And it takes a lot of the thinking out of the process.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want you to expand on. You had talked about how you kind of had gone off track a little bit.
Yeah.
I want you to talk about kind of how that, what kind of some of the lessons learned and how you were able to kind of steer everybody back on the right path.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, don't go away. Learning about process and this is, in case you haven't figured out, this is kind of our standard operating procedure where I'll usually do the take everybody out, right? And then if you listen to the spots, just a couple of spots, all good stuff.
Yep.
And then listen, and then you'll hear Jay's voice coming back in. You might hear a little Warren Zevon if you're listening to My FM 101.1.
Sure you will. Yes, you will.
Which is always motivating and will get you through a setting.
But to your point, it makes this process smooth and fluid.
All right. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
And we're back. My FM 101.3. Jay Marsden with the Marsden Law Group. John Drohan, Main Effort Financial. Tom here in the studio with us. We are talking policies and procedures today. Why, you ask? Well, because for a lot of our clients, they say, we see you on the front of the house, but what happens behind the house? What happens in the back of the house?
What happens behind that curtain?
That's right, behind the curtain, behind door number 3. What happens? And we're talking about policies, procedures, the importance of them, and how they can help your business, help your practice, help
everything,
help kind of streamline everything you're doing.
Anything,
everything you're doing. Yep. Yeah, and you do it every way. It's a great point. You do it in a lot of ways that you just don't even think about. It's just kind of innate. You go up and think about we're heading into the wintertime. You're going to wake up one day, there's going to be 1.5 feet of snow in the driveway, and you're going to say, okay, I have to kind of go into my routine, my policy, my procedures. I mow my lawn a certain way, I plow my driveway a certain way. There's a certain way you do it for a whole bunch of reasons, right?
Yeah.
Put the gas in first. The gas doesn't go in after. There's a whole bunch of reasons you do it that way.
And that's going back to, that's one of the Army things. They would probably list that. They say, listen, put the gas in first and then not after.
Yes. But you know what?
Let's be clear.
But before the break, we were talking about, you were kind of razzing me a little bit about, tell us about the thing that you had, and what you tend to forget is when you have been the chief cook and bottle washer, you assume that everybody, at least I do, you assume that everybody knows what to do, right? And by the way, unless I communicate it in one of any number of ways, the answer is they don't, right? But in your head, you just assume that this is what everybody kind of knows what to do. And so then you start to kind of drift a little bit, and then that's where things kind of get off the rails.
So tell me what happened. What happened in the office? You remember
It was nothing crazy. It was just, so our policies and procedures, or our procedures, if you will, kind of look like this. New client calls into the office. Somebody gets information.
Wait, there's not like a big whoopee light that goes off and like
big alarm,
whoop, whoop.
big alarm goes off, right? All hands on deck. Everybody stops.
Jay gets on. Everybody listens to Jay talk to him on the right.
So no, it's not even me. Somebody,
boiling point.
But it's a great point. It's not even me. I'm not screening people. Somebody comes in the office, your call gets screened, if you will. Screened by screening we mean, what are you calling the office for? Right? Somebody calls in and says, I need to order some flowers. We can't help you out.
How big is the estate that we're talking about that you want to have probated?
Well, that's basically what you do. Can we help you out? Right? People will call us and we'll say, you know what, that's a litigation issue. We don't do litigation. It's in the probate world, but we don't do litigation. We have to refer you out, and here's how we do that. But somebody calls in, their call gets screened. We find out what they're calling about. We get some basic information from them, and then we set an appointment, right? Now, the things that you start to think about is, well, who should be setting the appointments? Is it one person? Is it two people? How do you set an appointment? How do you put it in the calendar? Does it go in a certain color-coded section? That appointment for an hour, that appointment for an hour and a half. Putting in for a 15-minute appointment for an hour and a half meeting doesn't really help anything out. It kind of messes up the whole day. So we kind of, you got to figure that out. Then our clients get some kind of information that goes to them before the meeting, kind of a little bit of pre-work, if you will. So they come in and they've done their homework. And then that makes our meeting more productive when they come in. It's a better use of the client's time. That information then is used to kind of convert our conversation into what would look like as far as their estate plan goes, right? So I've always operated off of, let's use these, we have intake sheets, client data sheets, call them what you want, that we use with our clients to help build the estate plans. And sometimes I'll just kind of go into a meeting, and if somebody doesn't have that intake sheet with them or haven't filled it out, we have two options. We can grab one and bring it into the meeting with us and fill it out with the client, or I can just wing it and fill out a yellow legal pad and write all the notes down and then hand those notes off to somebody so that they can translate that into an estate plan.
Or so they have to translate the hieroglyphics.
That's my point. You asked me
what about poor handwriting.
You asked me where things get off the rails. That's where things get off the rails. I tell people, look, we need to follow the rules and follow the procedures, and so do I. Hold me to account.
And it's funny because you say that, because that happens the same thing in our office. I mean, oftentimes I'm the one who derails,
yes.
right? I'm the one who kind of goes off script because I feel like I can, right?
Yeah.
Because I feel like
it's your company.
Because right, I mean, it's my company, but I also am comfortable enough in that I know what I want to find out.
Correct.
I know, right, and you're the same way. You know what's important. You know when your client, you'll be able to identify what the problem is, what their issue is, what their concern is.
Correct.
And you can do that without going through the detailed intake sheet. And I'll tell you, in a lot of ways, when we talk about the standard operating procedure, you can overdo it, right? You can overdo it to the point where it just becomes too cumbersome, right?
It becomes real tedious.
Yeah.
It could become tedious. You got to find out what's important, right?
Yeah, you have to find out what's important. And I'm sure, think about it, if I'm a client coming into the law office, right, and I'm like, hey, here's what I'm concerned about, right? And you start, saying, all right, here, you need to fill out this form. Think about when you go into the doctor's office, right?
Yeah.
And the doctor kind of has you where they want you, right?
Yeah.
There's really not a whole lot you can do about you. You can now. How detailed and how well you fill out that form? Are they going to schedule surgery based on what you just filled out on the form? Probably not,
no,
right?
That's right.
It's going to be based on what you tell what the interaction with the doctor is.
But your answer to the questions on that form is going to guide your conversation that you're going to have with the doctor, right? The questions that we ask for people to kind of come in and be thinking about the estate planning process is going to guide our conversation with our client, because people will come in all the time and they say, this is what I need, this is what I want. And we'll say, okay, great, let's have a conversation. Okay, now do you mind if I ask you some questions?
Right.
And then you start your questioning strategy based on what they've told you, right? And then you start to get a sense of, okay, you came in here, you were hot to trot to make sure that you have a trust, and based on our conversation, all your money is in retirement money. So a trust doesn't do anything for you. Well, but I thought I needed a trust. No, you might have. Let's talk it through. Let's figure out. That doesn't make any sense. If we just come in and start drafting trusts up without any procedure
what'll
to kind of
happen, right?
feel this out, the client's going to say, I just paid for a trust and you told me I have nothing to put in it. I don't need one. I feel like I'm kind of getting railroaded here. What's the story?
And you're like, say, you are.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah. We didn't do a good job. We didn't do a good job of teasing this information out. And a good kind of, client information gathering process will pull all that out.
Well, that's your procedure, right?
Yep.
That's your procedure that you do, and what it does, it makes you think of things that you may be distracted from, or that may not that the client may not be. And like you just said, like, listen, all I know is that I just inherited $10 million.
Yep.
Right? I just scratched this scratch ticket. What do I need to do? And you can kind of get sucked into like this is like a big problem, or I just my dad just went into a nursing home. What am I going to do right now? As opposed to, okay, let's stick with the process. Let's understand kind of what we're dealing with. And for the most part, we do that, but think about how many times you brought up the yellow legal pad, right? How many times you're like, all right, hey, okay, I get it, and you want to kind of get to the client, get the client to a place where they're okay. I feel like that you're going to be able to help me.
I'm getting some value.
Yep. I feel like you're going to be able to, because that's that's part of it, right? When someone comes to see you or me for the first time, that's part of it is like, well, we're evaluating whether or not we can help you, and if we can, then we want to help you because that's what we do, right? That's how we do business, and that's like how we make a living. So at the same time, we're trying to get you to, if we feel like we can help, we want you to feel like that we can help, right?
Right.
So there's that, but then at the same time, if we get stuck in like this, all right, and what's your mother's maiden name, and and you're gonna get stuck in these kind of this laundry list of details that could change, and we're kind of talking about kind of the the sales process or that initial meeting. It could kind of throw that off, right? It could kind of throw that in. So. And we learned that. It's a good example because I learned this when I first came into the business, right? So when the great Mike D'Anzaris, which we've talked about, the great Mike D'Anzaris, he's having a tough time right now because his New York Jets. Mike D'Anzaris is the Jets.
We had a tough weekend.
His New York Jets is a Jets and a Yankees fan.
He's having
the Yanks. So right now it's Wednesday. The Yanks won last night. They didn't get swept. Right?
No. We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens when they go back to LA.
Yep.
So the Yankees are in trouble. They're on the ropes. The Jets. I can't.
That's a whole other show.
It's a whole
other show.
So anyway, back to Mike D'Anzaris. I feel badly for you right now, Mikey. But when Mike D'Anzaris, when he brought me in, Mike D'Anzaris was old school, right?
Yep.
And where the sales process was, I'm going to sit in front of you for the next 2.5 hours, no matter what. So whether or not you buy life insurance from me, we'll see. But I'm staying here for 2.5 hours. And when I came in and I was using his process, I'm like, this doesn't work, not just for me, but for any of these people that I'm talking to.
Yeah,
they're not used to.
It's not a timeshare sale.
It's not like the old days, right?
Yeah.
Exactly, right?
Yep.
So I had to kind of, and where Mike would get out his laptop computer, which is which is kind of new to the industry at that point, and he would go through and type in all the information just so he could print up this proposal. He could print up this hey, this is how much your life insurance is going to cost.
Well, you bring up a great point. There's a cross section where your process can become super tedious in that fashion.
Yeah, and that's what I had to do, right?
Yeah.
I had to change my process, right?
Yep.
I had to change it so I was able to figure out how I was going to capture all that information.
Yeah.
But at the same time, not just have the client just like drag it out of the client in the first meeting, right?
Yeah, we try to, like, our process is very kind of conversational. Right, people come in and there's always some banter in the beginning. Hey, how's it going? What's happening? How about that weather? How about
do
them
they laugh
socks?
at my jokes?
That's exactly. Don't
right?
laugh.
We're testing the water, right?
Well, hold on. Don't laugh. So we have. So there's that, right? We have that conversation. And then at some point we kind of get down to business, right? And so then we'll say to people, what brings you in? Just help. Tell us about yourself, right? Tell us about the Drohans. What brings you in, right? And then they'll start talking about what their issue is. And then our job is to shut up and listen to our client. That's our process, right? There's a reason you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? Listen, right? So we'll listen and we'll listen and we'll listen and then we'll listen and we'll ask a couple of questions along the way, and we try to kind of tease out all the information that we think we need. But it's not is it Mr. You go by Mr. or Miss? Okay, Miss, click, MR. Is it John, Jack? Do you have a nickname? Like, it's not that. It's not that at all. It's as let's have a conversation. Let's talk about what's on your mind, what's important to you. And then when that whole piece of it is over, then we sort of have not a script, but we have a way that we approach an estate planning conversation. We have a way that we approach, because now we know what that conversation is supposed to look like, right? Single individual, no kids, that's a different conversation than couple, big family, lots of kids, dysfunction, not dysfunction. The conversation goes, the clients drive the conversation. Probate meetings are different. Medicaid meetings are different. But that's our world, right? We stay a little bit of real estate, we stay in that world. But yes, there's a process to those meetings, so we make sure we catch everything.
Yeah, and one of the important things is developing that process is you're gonna refine it, right? And you're always going to be improving. That was one of the things about the standard operating procedure. We were always updating it, right? We were always changing. There was always some tactic or some idea or some weapon or something that caused the evolution. Same thing in the McDonald's, right? That things don't just remain stagnant. So that standard operating procedure or that process or that whatever your policy and procedures is always going to be evolving, right? And that's in any organization.
Oh, we get a version every year.
Yeah.
Every year. There's improvements every year.
Yeah. So there's the evolvement of your procedures, and then the other part of it, and this is what I can't emphasize enough, is, for lack of a better term, the training of it, or the understanding of it, or the implementation of it.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing that if you, and this is when you had alluded to before about where you kind of go off track, and you being the guy, but if your people kind of go off track or don't follow the procedure as you've drawn it up in your mind, or more importantly, as you've written it down, so everybody understands it, that's when you're like, okay, hey, remember, let's go back and let's do this the right way. And let's practice doing this the way we draw it up. And there's going to be things that are going to adjust, and we're going to have, and that's the beauty of having a good procedure, in that you have the flexibility where you can adjust to things that you don't necessarily see coming, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right? And your procedure's built for that. Your procedure. So if there's something else, right? So let's say on your intake sheet, let's say in your initial conversation, something comes up that you're not aware of, or that you're not really familiar of. Like, well, my uncle, who I've inherited this money from, is from the Ukraine. And you're like, whoa, okay, so that's new to me. That's something that I'm not super, we've never done this before.
I inherited some property, and where's the property? Well, you're assuming right away we're assuming it's Massachusetts.
Got to be Massachusetts, right?
Oh, it's in Oregon.
Yep.
Okay, well, hold on. And that's a whole. Well, hold on. I'm not sure we can help you, but let's talk about it. But yes, that's nice to know information. Very helpful.
And remember, because at the end of the day, all we're trying to do is we're trying to accomplish an objective. And in our case, the objective is we want to make our client happy.
Sure.
Our client has an issue, has a problem, or has a concern, and we're trying to help them to rectify that.
Well, think about this also. Like at the end of our meetings, right, when client says, yeah, you know what, I want to work with you guys, and I want to have you develop my estate plan for me. Great. And then there's always a question. So what are the next steps, right?
Yep.
And if you don't know, if you don't have any, you're like, I mean, imagine going into a place and they sit down and say, I'm ready to go. Guys, I'm ready to go. What happens next? And the answer is,
I don't know.
I don't know what happens next.
It's an excellent question.
Let me think about it for a second. How could we proceed here? How can we proceed? I mean, our goal is to try to make the client experience better, and our goal is to make the clients feel like they're getting the value that we hope they're getting, right? So you want to be able to say, well, here's what the next steps are. First thing we got to do is we got to do this. Then we're going to do this. Then we ask about who's going to do what by when. Then we're going to draft these things. You're going to get them by then. This is kind of where the path that we go on.
Yeah, which is great, because it's work, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's work. It's work. It takes time, and this is where those details come in, right? This is like when you give the client, say, okay, look, this is going to suck, but I need this information, right?
Yep.
Do your, here's the information data sheet that I need.
Well, and we can say to the client, we can do this one of two ways. You can do a little bit of homework, right? And then you could bring this in, and then we have a really productive conversation. Or if you bring this in and you say, I didn't get past my name, okay, that's fine too. Yeah. That just means our meeting is a little different, right? And that's what we're trying to kind of capture for the clients, right?
Yeah. So one of the big things, and again, as we talk about just in my own experience and like the experience of our office from a procedural standpoint, and you kind of hit on this, is that once it's like, okay, the next level, right? How does this work? There are some important milestones that kind of have to happen,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
So there's some important things. So, for instance, in your case, it would be the data. Like I need to know the players, the people that are involved that I'm going to put into this estate plan, right? I need to know real names, not just like not nicknames, but I need to know their names. I need to know kind of who they are.
I need to know some addresses. Some people I need to know phone numbers of.
Yep.
I don't need social security numbers. I definitely don't need that. But this is what I need. Yep.
Yeah, and so there's going to be some legwork. So there's some important things that have to happen in there. And so I guess my point is that when, because there's these important milestones that have to happen, this is where the procedure, this is where having like that standard procedure is really going to help you.
Yep.
Right? And say, this is how we acquire data, right?
Sure.
This is, maybe in your office or in our office. So for instance, in our office, we have the person who's responsible for the movement of assets, right?
Yep.
So their job, their number one priority, their primary. If anyone were to ask them, like, what's my job in the office? My job is to move the assets, whether it's in or out, right?
Yep.
That's their primary function.
I'm the transfer person.
Exactly, right? So we've kind of simplified that in the sense that if anything that has to do with moving money, that person is responsible for that. And then, and money can move in any number of different ways. So it's their job to recognize, okay, hey, money's moving. Where's the money coming from? So then they say, oh, if the money's coming from, say, a 401k, then there's a certain process on how that money's going to move over.
Yep.
If there's money coming from an IRA or from another account, there's a different process in how that money moves over. And then all of the things that go along with that. And so that procedure, that person knows that. And then, but it's also important for everybody else in the office to know it as well. Like they need to understand how it works, because then they say, hey, I got this transfer form here. And then they're like, all right, hey, guess what? And what I'm doing is I'm handing this to Jay. For those of you who can't see it on the radio, but they hand it to
I'm the transfer guy.
because that person knows how to do the transfer. And then if the transfer person's not there, I have my alternate transfer, which usually is probably me. But in many cases, in your organization, you have to have some redundancy because those are important things, right? Like in your case, getting that information in order to put it into the trust and to fill out the trust, you know kind of what you want to say, but the details, especially in a legal document, are very important.
Well, and we're constantly making sure that everybody kind of knows like what their job is, right? Like, so we'll talk to the paralegal, and the paralegal will say, this person has a bunch of questions, and I'll say, okay, those aren't paralegal questions, those are lawyer questions, right? So that needs to be scheduled with the lawyer. That's not your wheelhouse. Your wheelhouse is these things, right? You need to know how to do this part of the job, right? And then somebody else will call in and they'll say, well, I'm the receptionist and I answered the phone and they have a bunch of questions. Okay, that's absolutely not a receptionist question. That's set some time up with the lawyer. Maybe it's so everybody has to kind of know what their strong suit is and what their superpower is, so that those people can do those things, and then that I think is what results in the best outcome for the client.
Right, and at the end of the day, this is going to benefit the client, right? Because you're not going to miss anything, right?
Correct.
You're not going to miss an important step or an important piece of something, because your procedure, you've constructed your procedure enough where it's not going to allow you to do that.
Correct.
Right? And then again, it's all about service. It's all about making the people. So if the client wants to move, let's say have an estate plan, they want to feel good because I've done my revocable trust, I've done my will, I've done my healthcare proxy, and my durable power of attorney. I've done my estate plan, and now I can go to sleep at night knowing that if something happens to me, everything's going to happen the way I want it to happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's really important. And in order for them to do that, to get from point A to point B, that procedure is going to make it. You're going to do it right the first time.
Yeah.
And you're going to do it relatively quickly, or as quickly as the process will allow you to do it. And and then with some of the variables that get thrown into that.
But this happens everywhere. Everywhere you go, whether it's completely done in a way that makes you say, "Oh, I can see what's going on. There's a process there," but it happens everywhere you go. If you go to a restaurant, there's a process, right? They might have a training manual, they could call it a whole bunch of things, but there's a way that they do things so that when somebody comes in, they know exactly how to get that person coached up, so that they can say to them, at the end of your training, at the end of your review, your analysis, your study of the policies and procedures, you should be able to function in that role. That's what you should be able to do. And this is everywhere you go. It's like this.
And so I think that like the takeaway or the kind of the lesson, every show has it's a kind of like a Mr. Rogers lesson learned.
There's a takeaway.
Yeah. So the takeaway here is that having process doesn't necessarily just have to be for a law firm or financial planning firm or for a restaurant or for anything. The process can apply to anything that you do.
Yeah.
So if you work with a group, let's say you work in a nonprofit, you can have a process of how you do that administrative, how you take in donations and right, there's a process. But I'm talking about something even more simply, like your family or just personally, right? So you say, okay, I want to, how many times have you heard clients say, I want to get better at understanding my finances. I want to get better at that, right? So you say, okay, look, first of all, you call us, right?
Yep.
We're going to help you out. But here's some things that you can do, right? So A, know where your stuff is, right?
Have a ballpark idea.
Yep, have a file cabinet, right?
Yep.
And save this. And then, there's some people who are like, well, I save every piece of paper that I get. Nope, let's help you out with your process. So knowing that this thing, identifying like what's important and what's not, and you can kind of coach them up with that. Say, this is important, this isn't. And the same thing think about it for when you're doing your estate plan, if there's a change, right? So let's say every half year or every year, I'm going to review, okay, has there been any changes that I need that are significant? And if I have a question, I can always call my attorney.
Right.
But if there is, I can identify kind of what those changes are. Like changes meaning like now my children have reached the age of 18, right? And those type of things where,
sure.
And if you have kind of this kind of review process in your mind, like, hey, every October, I get my septic tank pumped, right?
Sure.
Those, and you can kind of make this kind of almost like kind of standard operating procedure of the important milestones, like the important things that have to happen. It makes things a lot easier.
Well, but go ahead.
I was going to say, and you don't miss them, right? You don't miss them. There's not something like I forgot about renewing my driver's license, or I forgot about paying my child's annual tuition bill.
Well, think about how you do it in your business because without it, it's chaos, right? And so you try to control what you can control. We try to do the same thing, right? It brings order to what's kind of disorderly, right?
Right.
And it's the same thing at your house, right? Same thing at your house. You go to your house and you say, we get the bills come in. Where do we put them? I don't know. Let's put them somewhere. Okay, well that's not a bad process. That's not a great process, right? And these things got to get paid. And to your point, there's maintenance, there's upkeep, there's this and that. And it's the same thing. And when you go to a business and you say to a business, what's your process, right, for something like that? What's your financial planning process? What's your wealth management process? What's your estate planning process? What's your probate process? That gives you a sense of, do these guys kind of know what they're doing? Like, do they understand what's supposed to happen? Because everything is a process, right? The probate court is a process. They want the documents filed. They want these documents filed, and they want them filed in this order.
Right.
And if you don't file them in that order, they're going to reject your filing. They're going to kick it back to you, and you're going to start all over again. This is what's going to happen. So you want to get a sense of that the people you're working with, that they have a process, and that they know. I think that they know and understand the importance of the process. We used to take people through retirement income plans at Fidelity forever. Right? It was like, you're going to do these many retirement income plans. You'd call somebody up and you'd say, I need to call and talk to you about your retirement income planning. And guess what? They didn't just say, do it. They gave me this tool, this worksheet, so that I can go through and we need to start making some assumptions. They have a process for doing that, right? How to evaluate how much life insurance you need from your life insurance world. They have a process. There's a worksheet. There's
a couple different processes.
That's right. That's right.
The Mike Dianzaris process, which is
right. There's never enough. You never have enough.
You never
have enough. Yep. And then there's other people who sharpen the pencil and say, "Let's get you right to it.
Right.
This is how much you need." Right?
Mikey never overinsured anybody.
No, never. No,
he
never.
didn't.
There's no such thing. There's no such thing.
Well, I mean, of course there's such a thing, right? Of course there is, but not Mike Dian.
But
he's the godfather of life insurance.
But you got to get to a number. How do you get there?
Yeah.
Well, there's a whole bunch of ways to do it. We're going to pick one. We're going to start with this, and then we're going to improve on it over time because things change. Technology changes. The actuarial business changes. They can kind of dial in a little bit more, and they can figure it out. We know, this is what we're trying to do. That's where you're going.
All right, I feel good about this.
All right,
I feel
process
good.
this thing up.
Yeah, this process has been processed.
Yep.
All right, So until next time, make sure get yourself organized, right? Think about some of the things that you can do to make your home process, your home standard operating procedure a little bit more.
Well, and don't
easy.
be afraid to check with your professionals that you work
And
with and say,
don't
hey,
be
what's your process?
Don't be afraid to ask
And by the way, you might find some things out that you didn't realize. You call your tax person right now and say, hey, what's your process? They might say, oh my God, I'm so glad you asked, because now you're going to make my life better by adopting my process instead of pushing back, right? Don't say, well, this is the way I want to do it. They do this a lot. They do a lot of returns.
They've done it before.
They got to lawyers, same thing, right? We've done a few estate plans, right? We understand the process. Buy into the process. Make your life easier.
All right. We'll see. We're gonna shut it down.
We'll see some of you. Yeah, we'll see some of you.
We'll see some of you soon. All right. Until next time, everybody, be safe out there. Have a great weekend. It is now November.
Yeah. Hope you had a great Halloween.
Hope you had a great Halloween. Nice.
Send us the pictures of you in your costumes.
Yeah. Right. MoneyInTheLaw.net. All right. Thanks for joining us on Money in the Law. We'll see everybody next time.
Have a great week, everybody.